Good morning, YouTube. Welcome to the book review. Today I'm covering this short volume, Nuds and Nationalism by George Orwell. This was published posthumously, and it has a few short texts. This series, I don't tend to buy books retail very often unless I just can't get them pre-owned at all and they're very new. But I went into Waterstones and they had a collection of these Penguin Moderns for £1 a piece. So I bought like 10 of them. Of the ones I've read so far, this is the only one I've really liked. I also got some modern writers like Andy Warhol, who else? Allen Ginsberg, and they're not very good. But this book is fascinating. Now, if you know anything at all about George Orwell, you know he was a socialist of sorts, although a sort of unique one, who fought for the anarchist side during the Spanish Civil War, who was disillusioned by the tyranny of the communists and how that revolution was betrayed, in Trotsky's words. And obviously you'll know him from being the author of books like 1984, Animal Farm, Homage to Catalonia, which I believe is about the Spanish experience, and The Road to Wigan Pier, Down and Out in Paris and London, is it called? Something like that. I haven't read that one, only a short excerpt of it. Anyway, this book in particular is fascinating because it isn't just some kind of rant against nationalism, sort of against patriotism. Like, you hear the word nationalism nowadays and it has a negative connotation, and George Orwell does use it in the negative sense, but he's not just talking about nationalists in the sense that we might use the term today, almost synonymous with patriot, but maybe with I don't know, like people are a little bit less trustworthy of people that identify as nationalists rather than patriots. Although it's changing now, I think. George Orwell actually defines nationalism more like tribalism or group affinity. Describes it as a kind of obsession with a single idea, with a single identity, a way of thinking that will block certain other possible thoughts. So Orwell's definition of nationalism really includes any kind of tribalist, sort of close-minded group. So a political party, partisanship for a political party might be a form of nationalism. So, for example, if you look at something like the Momentum movement in this country, and Jeremy Corbyn's support base of fanatics, you might call that a kind of nationalism. And he also talks about he doesn't call it inverted nationalism, though that's what I would call it. So he talks about various kinds of positive nationalism, in other words, pro your own nationality, in other words. He talks about what he calls neo-Toryism. He talks about Celtic nationalism, as we see now in groups like the secession movements in Scotland and Ireland, places like that, Zionism. Then there's also transferred nationalism. I don't know if in the original book, not this excerpted version, it had entries here for communism or political Catholicism, but the fact that he's already referenced them earlier in the book makes no difference. But he sees when he says communism, by the way, he's talking in terms of the Soviet Union, because just the time it was written, that was just, the term communism was just completely synonymous with Sovietism at the time. And he sees that as a form of nationalism, especially, he means like European, well, say British nationalists, for example, British communists, for example, that idealize the Soviet system. Now, this is very interesting colour feeling. Let me read some of this. The old-style contemptuous attitude towards natives has been much weakened in England, and various pseudo-scientific theories emphasising the superiority of the white race have been abandoned. Among the intelligentsia, colour feeling only occurs in the transposed form. Now, doesn't this sound familiar to the contemporary experience? That is, as a belief in the innate superiority of the coloured races. This is now increasingly common among English intellectuals, probably resulting more often from masochism and sexual frustration than from contact with the Oriental and Negro nationalist movements. Even among those who do not feel strongly on the colour question, snobbery and imitation have a powerful influence. I'm shaking this camera around like crazy. Okay. Almost any English intellectual would be scandalised by the claim that the white races are superior to the coloured. True? Not that that statement is true, I mean that they would be scandalised. Whereas the opposite claim would seem to him unexceptionable even if he disagreed with it. Nationalistic attachment to the coloured races is usually mixed up with the belief that their sex lives are superior, and there is a large underground mythology about the sexual prowess of Negroes. Anyway, so he basically explaining that this is a kind of, in a way, an inverted nationalism, and an inverted racism even, that is really no different in... When you get to its base elements, it's really no different from the sort of vulgar nationalism of white nationalists, etc. And in Class Feeling here, he talks about how champagne socialists, basically, although he doesn't put it in those terms, that idealise other classes even though they don't belong to them and just hate everything about their own. And he even goes into, look, Anglophobia with Brits, and this would apply to other countries as well, but that are basically hate their own country and will always side with the opposition, regardless of who it is, just because they're always suspect against their own country. You see this a lot in America as well, of course. And he even defines Trotskyism as its own form of nationalism, which is anti-communist, as he puts it, although Trotskyists wouldn't identify that way now. Again, he's using communist in the sense of actually existing communism in the Soviet Union. So he sees Trotskyists as being fanatics against Stalin in the exact reverse way of Stalin's actual cult of power, his actual fan base, for lack of a better word. Yeah, and you see, basically he's talking about groupthink. That's what it all comes down to. He's talking about tribalism, he's talking about groupthink. The other two pieces are worth reading as well, include especially the one on anti-Semitism, rather. Although Notes on Nationalism, the original text, is the most essential reading, and I would recommend it to anybody that's interested in political analysis and political ideology, perhaps even sociology. It's not strictly a book on nationalism in the sense that we would use the term now, in its more specific sense referring to literal nations. But if you're interested in tribalism, growing divides in society, just unique takes, I suppose, on social and political phenomena, by all means, get this book. As I say, it's like £1. I got it in Waterstones for £1. Normally I wouldn't buy retail, as I say, but I mean, that's cheaper than ordering it on Amazon, isn't it? All things considered. So yeah, check this out. It's a good one.